We turn to our in-studio guest right here, somebody I ran into at the Combine, one of our friends and longtime friends of this program from The Athletic and Fox Sports, Bruce Feldman. Good to see you, Bruce. How long were you at the Combine? How long were you there?
Red-eyed in there Monday morning. Got out of there Friday afternoon.
What'd you pick up there? What do you got?
A lot. I think it's hard to come up trying to remember everything you gathered, because I think when I saw you, I was trying to remember. I had like an hour and a half conversation with TJ Hushmanzada.
Yeah, that's where I was. You stayed there for another hour, standing right there.
TJ and I talked. So he is big in the youth football space, and I coach my kid, and so we talked about that for like 30 minutes. Then we talked about a bunch of other stuff about receivers, and I mean, he's a great resource because he knows so much, and he's been working with a lot of top receivers and seen a lot of quarterbacks in this process. So yeah, it was, and that's, to me, that's the Combine. Like you go around and you run into people. I love that experience of it. I saw people I hadn't seen in a long time. I saw some people I wasn't even thinking of seeing, you know, where it's like, I bumped into your old football coach who's now with the Chargers. Yes. I wasn't setting up anything, but I just kind of caught up with him for a minute. It's just a great where I like that city for it too. Oh, it's great. I agree. The Combine should be there for forever and a day. Jayden Daniels emerged as a mystery man, quite frankly, and everybody saw what he could do. Everybody saw him win the Heisman. He didn't work out. He wasn't there when the quarterbacks were working out. I honestly have learned nothing about him at the Combine. At least Drake May I heard from and I saw. Caleb Williams didn't work out at all. But he stuck till the very end. Like, he literally turned the lights out on Saturday, watched his teammates go through the drills. Can you help me on who Jayden Daniels is and what teams may be learning about him? Yeah, I think Jayden Daniels from the start, when he got to ASU, and I don't know, 168 pounds or whatever he weighed. Right. And it was on a program that was kind of reeling under Herm at that point. Got to LSU, made big improvement, and then made another huge stride as a passer. This past year, you know, they really embraced technology. It was interesting. Jack Marucci, who's, by the way, the same guy behind the Marucci Bats empire, is a longtime LSU trainer. And he is arguably the smartest guy I know who works in college sports. And they really got in on the front end of on the technology side, what it can do for quarterbacks with a company, I think, from Germany, that was doing some really cool stuff. They embraced it. It made a big difference with what Jayden did as a passer. And I think you'd see him in games and you'd see that he has this different gear. I don't want to say he's Lamar, because to me Lamar is kind of one of one. But in terms of what he did last year, was pretty amazing to see how far he's grown as a passer from the time he got to LSU. Now, it certainly helped that he had two elite receivers. I mean, Brian Thomas Jr. is spectacular. Malik Neighbors is freaky as well. So on that side, I don't, you know, to me, this is such an interesting quarterback group, because obviously there's Caleb, you mentioned May, and then I think behind them, JJ looked really good, JJ McCarthy, and Michael Penix Jr. looked terrific. And I think it's a deep group, but it wouldn't surprise me if those guys, who a lot of people are saying are like the fourth and fifth guys, depending on who you want fourth and who you are in fifth, they may turn out to be better quarterbacks than a couple of those guys in the top three.
Well, obviously, those were the two quarterbacks that we saw last in college football. Those are the starters for the national championship game. But we were just talking before you were walking out here. Are we talking about McCarthy and Penix more because they worked out? They spun it. Like if Jayden Daniels got out there, ran his 40, did the drills, spun it, and then we'd be talking about him as, why isn't he maybe the first overall pick while Caleb sat, you know? That and again, this may just be the media battle the PR battle that might be an important piece to anybody's campaign to get drafted as high as possible, or not at all.
I think if those other guys threw, I still think Penix would have been the guy that DJ would have been raving about and other people would have been going. Because when you see him throw in person, I get it, he's left-handed, and sometimes people's optics think it comes out looking a little different. To me, Penix throws it. Nobody throws it better in this group, whether they threw on Saturday or not. Obviously, Joe Milton had the biggest arm, but in terms of just how he throws the ball, I think Penix is remarkable. And by the way, Penix didn't run the 40. I will say this.
So one of the quarterbacks I've gotten to know over the years is Keaton Slovis, former USC, now BYU quarterback.
He was out there too?
And Keaton ran really well. Keaton ran 4.55, and I think that, like, if you were a Pitt fan or a USC fan, you're like, whoa. Well, Keaton's in a group, Les Spellman, who's one of the best combine trainers, speed guys in the country. So he had a group of a lot of quarterbacks that were out here in Southern California, and Jayden's in that group, and Penix is in that group. And hopefully not speaking out of school here, Keaton, but like a week and a half ago, they did a mock combine. And I think Keaton ran maybe 4.60, which obviously he ran even faster when it mattered. But at one point we talked about Penix. He was like, he's going to really surprise people. He goes, he 4.5, maybe 4.4. And he didn't run. But he really can run. And I think, again, I don't want to stand here, I'm stumping for Michael Penix Jr., but I think to me, he's the most interesting guy in the draft because he was the guy who actually, I used my Heisman vote on him. I think I had Jayden too, but what he did with that program was remarkable. And to see how he threw it, not surprised, because that's what we've seen him do. He wasn't great against your alma mater. He was great against Texas, and he was great almost against everybody else, though.
Well, I'll push back a little bit. I thought he was great against Michigan. Michigan obviously had a terrific defense. I think he also got his ankle stepped on, unfortunately for him, at the very beginning of the second half. I'm wondering how healthy he was for the rest of the game. But that dude can figure out a defense pre-snap really well. I mean, he's using his experience very well. I don't know, man. Raiders sitting there at 13. You got the Saints sitting there.
Don't overthink it. Don't overthink it if you're them.
Right?
I mean, I think he's awesome. The other thing I love about him is, and we talked about this probably a month ago, of all the guys, especially the quarterback position, usually, and DJ and I talked about this because this is a story I did and I interviewed him for it, was Penix faced real adversity that really shook him for a minute. And he came through the other side. He's really candid talking about it. And he's faced it and dealt with it. Mm-hmm. And so when I talk to other quarterbacks who were, E.J. Manuel is a really bright guy, was obviously a former first-round pick. We talked about this, how like when he got hurt with the Bills, it's a different thing for you. How do you bounce back from it? A lot of quarterbacks, I'm not saying the main reason why the guys who are first-round picks don't work out is always because they can't handle adversity, but that is a big part of it. And this guy, we know how he came through it. So, yeah, if you told me he went 13, I'd be like, yeah, I think that's a wise pick for that franchise.
That might, if he does go 13, and Chris, on our Overreaction Monday, one of your first subject matters was 5 in the first 20. And I'm like, that's not an overreaction. We got 5 in the first 13. I'm serious.
Yeah, I mean, look, JJ's a terrific athlete. He throws well on the run. I get it. Some people are a little concerned. They think there's I talked to one NFL coach who's thought he was a little bit more of a one-speed pitcher in terms of want to see him layer the ball and do some other things. Right. But, great footwork. He's a winner. He's a mentally strong kid. I think there's, I could see him keep developing, and he threw it really well. I mean, the only one who probably threw it any better was Penix.
Yeah. I mean, Penix, I had not seen throw in person. I was wowed.
Yeah.
Honestly, every throw was beautiful. It was a work of art. I couldn't have been more impressed by what I saw. And I heard nothing but great things in the meeting rooms. By the way, out of all of them.
Yeah.
I didn't hear any, and that includes Marvin Harrison Jr. Out of the top choices, I didn't hear any of he didn't interview very well. All of them.
No, the one guy who I heard anything like a little bit of a pause on is somebody who I'm like, I would have no doubts about that guy's character. I just think a couple of the questions this particular person got asked, I think were it was kind of caught off guard by them and just kind of gave an honest answer. But everybody prepares for this process anyway. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't, certain guys shine more than others. I would just say that.
Bruce Feldman here on the Rich Eisen Show. Caleb Williams doing things differently. You're going to obviously hear that these are red flags, but you know him. When I met him and just saw him around, he was around. I mean, Saturday he was there. He was chilling out. He thanked all the people who ran the drills before at the end of the night. He stuck around the entire time. He was delightful. Seemed to be cheerful fella, but there's definitely a sense
that he's doing things differently, not going through a medical exam, not having an agent. He's going to speak to the the Bears after his pro day. They wanted to have him in today. They want him there today. They want to get in stuff with him right now. And he's like, no, I'll do it after my pro day. What can you lend as insight here about Caleb?
I definitely think there's a little bit of apprehension about how his dad is directing some of this. Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily think that's fair to Caleb, but I think that perception is growing. You hear, when you're in Indy, you hear little stories and they're specific stories. I don't think there's stuff that just kind of gets made up about somebody brought in, somebody to speak to the dad about something. And it was just like, the reaction was like, no, that's not how this works. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I think at some point you can think, hey, this is going to be what's best for us, but it doesn't, sometimes it just doesn't work that way. And that shouldn't affect, I think, how teams view him. But like you said, there are things that are a little bit different, but I think some of the stuff that I don't think it should get like an undertow. Like when the term red flags, because I actually asked somebody that for the story I did on The Athletic yesterday, and it was mm-hmm. like, and this person in the NFL was like, there's no red flags with him. There's no red flags. There's stuff that you're like, just like a lot of other top prospects, just probably like, when Patrick came out or when Joe Burrow came out or even when Trevor Lawrence came out. I mean, there's always stuff people can nitpick.
Sure. And his last year's performance or his team's last year's performance is the thing that it keeps getting brought up. Certainly with Jayden Daniels last season's performance, obviously his team didn't, get as far as they wanted either, but his personal performance. And Daniel Jeremiah keeps bringing up, well, don't forget, Caleb had a better team. He had Jordan Addison in his
He had a better offensive line in 2022. Last year's offensive line was really bad.
Right. And the defense just couldn't
do anything.
Couldn't stop the cold.
A wise man who we both know had said to me around midseason, I think Caleb's trying to hit a 5-run home run every time. And he's picked up I don't know if he's picked up bad habits, but there's times some of the coaches you talk to will say, there's a lot of easy throws here. You can take them and get 20 yards instead of doing some of these other things mm-hmm. where they may not work out. Again, we were at the Notre Dame game. It was a Saturday night game on the road. And obviously they struggled, but he really, he was not sharp in that game. He had a couple of picks. And I just think, no one's perfect at this stage. He's still really young. He does some remarkable things on film. The Patrick Mahomes comparisons, I get why they're there because of the off-platform throws, because, he's also kind of built similarly. He's just not quite as tall as Patrick, but he's a guy who can make crazy throws, can extend plays and improvise. The challenge, and DJ brought this up too, because I remember talking to him before the combine about, those Texas Tech teams versus last year's USC team, mm-hmm. bad offensive line, really bad defenses, if you told me Caleb was going to Andy Reid, I'd be like, okay, that's going to work out great. You just don't know where he's going to end up.
He's going to Chicago. I think he is. You didn't get that sense?
I'm just saying, is if you told me Andy Reid or somebody who is like that with quarterbacks and like that with offense and can make it work, Anthony Richardson is freakishly talented. I think he end up with the ideal coach in Indianapolis. Right.
Shane Steichen, yeah.
Shane Steichen has shown he's really good with that. I don't know how many coaches. I know they're all like, it's fit though. I think a lot of it. Some guys are going to be elite wherever they go.
Jayden Daniels with Kingsbury, right? Like that may be the winning fit.
Maybe.
I would think.
Again,
just off the top of your head,
he had two fantastic receivers.
McLaurin is not.
He's in that. He's
up there too.
He's in that element.
That's the one thing the Commanders have. They've got the receivers right there.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to keep in mind too is the quarterbacks do make guys. When you were a Michigan fan, Nico Collins is next level compared to what he now in the
Correct.
NFL.
Yeah.
He was a big recruit coming out of high school, but you didn't see this,
no doubt,
right? So you could see it. The quarterback can also bring receivers to another level. I don't know. I think Jayden Daniels got dramatically better. But let's say there are 5 quarterbacks that go in the first 20.
Yes.
The odds are 2, maybe 3 are going to be big disappointments.
Well, take a look at, again, the last time we saw
the Zach
quarterback
Wilson draft was...
That's it. I was about to say quarterback. It was Trevor Lawrence, who I'm already hearing people saying he's a disappointment based on him coming in. And it's like, listen, throw the first year out because Urban was a total disaster. Total, complete, unmitigated, worst ever disaster. And you don't have to, I understand you're talking about a colleague, but it's the truth. And then the second year, a disastrous first half in his first playoff game, overcomes that, makes the divisional round. This year they're 8-3 when I thought he was out for the season when he got hurt.
Right, I did too. Yes.
Right, when they were 8-3, and you have to account for all of that. Christian Kirk going out too. That's like his BFF. That's his guy. But Zach and Trey Lance and Mac, and now here's Justin Fields. We're wondering where the hell he's going.
Yeah.
So I understand what you're saying. There's a lot of caveats.
Yeah. Now the Rosen draft, and I say the Rosen draft because he was the one who, and Sam Darnold obviously has been a disappointment. But then you got Lamar on the back end,
Josh Allen,
and Baker
at the top,
and Baker has a second act looks really good too.
Right.
But it's if you hit 60%, of the 5. And I don't know who's going to be. I mean, some of it depends on circumstance.
Before I let you go, you got a good Chris Mortensen story. Everyone does in our business, certainly information, individuals like yourself.
I do. So I have great admiration and respect for him because of how he paved the way for guys like me, right? I wouldn't probably be in this in front of that if it wasn't for Chris Mortensen and probably Peter Gammons. And I'm grateful for.
You could throw Will McDonough in there too,
yeah,
right?
I mean, absolutely.
From the Globe. I can't believe I said the Herald yesterday, but yeah.
And yeah, so I mentioned Mort and Peter because I worked with them at ESPN and that part of it. So about a decade ago, when I had worked on a Mike Leach book, my career I felt like was in limbo at one point. I got sideways with ESPN. People know that story. One of the first people I heard from in Bristol, somebody had, he reached out to me when my head was spinning. And it wasn't like we were that close. I knew him, he'd been a good resource, but he reached out to me, and I later heard that he really went to bat for me with some high up people.
No kidding.
Yeah, and said, we can't afford to lose him, whatever. And I really appreciated that because he didn't need to do that. And, beyond that, over the years, I was like, this guy is incredibly gracious. And the thing that resonated with me, and DJ and I texted about this, and I made this point because obviously DJ, is like family to him. But I said, in the business that I'm in, this particular field, where the insider space, it tends to breed and brings out pettiness. It brings out a lot of insecurity. It's human nature. I mean, look, there's a lot of stuff I'm like, wasn't thrilled with how I handled that or whatever. And a lot of times there's a lot of cattiness between insiders and how people react. And again, it's, they don't always like each other. In fact, a lot of them hate each other, and it can be kind of cutthroat, and some of the stuff is not cool. And then you had him, who was such a resource and elevated people and encouraged them and supported them. And I know Mort was a big man of faith, and I suspect that had a big role for how he treated people and why human nature didn't get the worst of him the way it sometimes gets the worst of some of us, and I have, I know how I felt about Alex, his son, who I've gotten to know, who's a terrific young coach now at UAB. And so we talked about parenting stuff, and, I was crushed. I was out when I heard, and just thinking about, like, when I say he was the best, I mean, obviously he was a great reporter, but just in terms of, like, I don't know of anybody who in that role was that good of a, not just a teammate, but of a colleague or a, whatever, brethren, in terms of, like, to other reporters, because that just doesn't happen. I could go down the list and rattle off a bunch of names of people who are also insiders who either they hate each other or a lot of people hate them. They're good at their jobs, but it's like, if that job, and I say this because I can be guilty of it at times too, it tends to bring out the worst in you. Because you feel like you're always on call and you're staring at your phone, and it's like this relationship or that relationship. And Mort was different. He just, God bless him. He was an example that very few people have been able to follow.
God bless him is right. Well said. Well said, brother. Thanks for coming on, Bruce. We'll see you next week if you're up for it. Seriously, There's so much to talk about between now and the draft for sure with the college football world as well. Bruce Feldman, check him out in The Athletic and then obviously on Fox Sports when he's on there. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern for free.